Captain Michael Reyes stood in the terminal, his polished black shoes clicking softly against the cold tile floor as he walked toward gate C-14. The early morning light streamed in through the massive airport windows, but the brightness felt muted to him. Today wasn't a day for sunshine, it was a day for solemn duty. He wore his full dress uniform, the navy blue fabric sharp and pressed, each ribbon and medal meticulously placed. They caught glints of the sun as he moved, though he didn't wear them to be noticed. His posture was straight, but his eyes carried a heaviness, the kind that comes from seeing more than most people ever should. In his inside pocket, he carried a small, worn photograph, a young man in desert fatigues, grinning, his arm slung over the shoulder of a fellow soldier. Private Daniel Miller. 21 years old. Bright future. A laugh that could cut through the darkest days. Michael had been there the night Daniel's unit was ambushed. He'd been there when they'd covered him with the flag. He'd been the one to promise Daniel's mother that she wouldn't have to wait alone at the airport, staring down that long, lonely jet bridge. And so here he was. Not for business. Not for pleasure. For something far heavier. The airline had been notified in advance. His orders were official. He would board early to ensure he could be present when Daniel's coffin was unloaded, standing as the first pair of American eyes to greet him back home. It wasn't about convenience. It wasn't about rank. It was about respect. He reached the gate. A handful of passengers milled about, some sipping coffee, others scrolling on phones, a couple of kids playing with tiny plastic dinosaurs. The hum of the terminal felt almost jarringly ordinary compared to the weight of the moment in his chest. Michael stepped forward and handed his boarding pass to the gate agent. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with a professional smile that quickly faded as she scanned his ticket and glanced at the boarding list. "Sir," she said, her voice polite but firm, "this ticket doesn't qualify for priority boarding. You'll need to wait until your group is called." Michael blinked slowly, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his tone respectful, "I'm escorting a fallen soldier on this flight. I was told I'd be allowed to board first to be present when." Her expression tightened. "I'm sorry, sir, but the boarding order is for premium passengers first. I can't make exceptions." For a moment, the airport seemed quieter. Michael could hear the faint clinking of ice from a nearby vending machine, the muffled boarding announcements from the next gate over. He took in a slow breath, feeling the weight of that photograph in his pocket. This wasn't about him. This was about a promise. Michael's jaw tightened ever so slightly. He wasn't a man easily rattled, years in the service had taught him patience under fire, but something about this moment felt deeply wrong. This wasn't about a seat or boarding order, it was about honoring someone who could no longer speak for himself. "Ma'am," he said quietly, leaning forward just enough so his voice didn't carry too far, "I'm not asking for a favor. I'm here on official orders to escort the remains of Private Daniel Miller. His coffin will be in the cargo hold of this very plane. I need to be on board early to ensure I'm there when he's taken off at the other end." The young gate agent shifted uncomfortably but didn't meet his eyes. "I understand, sir," she said, her tone mechanical, "but our policy is very clear. Priority boarding is for first-class passengers, platinum members, and certain military on active travel orders. If we let you board now, it wouldn't be fair to others." The words landed like a slap. Fair to others? He glanced toward the seating area, business travelers tapping on laptops, families wrangling kids, vacationers with straw hats and suntan lotion peeking from their bags. None of them, he thought, had to explain why a coffin draped in the stars and stripes deserved a little dignity. Michael tried again, this time with more steel in his voice. "With respect, Private Miller gave his life in service to this country. I made a promise to his mother that I would stand by him every step of the way. There's no Group 1 or Group 2 when it comes to bringing a hero home." The agent's eyes darted toward a man approaching the counter, a supervisor, tall, with a pressed shirt and a name tag that caught the light. He listened briefly as the agent explained the situation. Then he turned to Michael, expression neutral but edged with impatience. Captain Reyes, he began, I appreciate your service. But we can't just make exceptions whenever someone has a personal request. Michael's gaze locked with his. This isn't a personal request. It's a duty. The supervisor's arms folded. Our rules exist for a reason. If I let you board early, I'd have to let everyone with a story do the same. We'd have chaos. Silence settled over the gate area. A man in a suit stopped mid-sip of his coffee. A mother with a toddler on her lap tilted her head, listening. Even the child clutching a stuffed bear looked over at the uniformed man speaking so deliberately. Michael could feel eyes on him, the air thick with an unspoken question, will he let this go? He straightened his shoulders, the ribbons on his chest glinting under the fluorescent lights. Sir, there are times when rules should serve people, not the other way around. This is one of those times. The supervisor didn't answer immediately. But something in the room had shifted. And Michael knew, he wasn't standing in this alone anymore. The pause after Michael's last words felt like it stretched for miles. The supervisor stood there, lips pressed thin, clearly weighing whether to dig in or yield. The gate agent avoided eye contact altogether, focusing on the boarding scanner as though the tiny glowing screen might swallow her whole. Then, from the back of the boarding area, a gravelly voice cut through the quiet. Let him through. Heads turned. A man wearing a faded Marine Corps cap stepped forward, moving slowly but with purpose. His hands were weathered, his posture slightly bent, but his eyes were sharp and unwavering. I've walked behind too many coffins to count, he said, his voice trembling just enough to betray the emotion behind it. That man isn't asking for comfort. He's asking for respect. The air shifted. People looked from the veteran to Michael, then back to the supervisor. A young mother in a red sweater stood up, adjusting the toddler on her hip. I'll give him my seat, she said. First class. He can sit up front, be ready when they open that door. Before the supervisor could respond, another voice chimed in, a man in a business suit near the boarding lane. I'll wait for the next flight if that's what it takes. I think a fallen soldier outranks my conference call. A murmur of agreement began to ripple through the crowd. The people sitting down leaned forward in their seats, some stood. An older woman in the corner dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The supervisor's face flushed. He opened his mouth, perhaps to defend the rules again, but he was cut off by a third passenger, a young guy with tattoos down his arms, saying, Sir, if you're worried about the rules, change 'em. Right now. The Marine veteran stepped closer to Michael, placing a hand on his shoulder. Captain, you lead the way. We'll follow. The supervisor's gaze darted around, realizing he was outnumbered, not by force, but by decency. Even the gate agent, who had stood silently by, now had tears pooling at the corners of her eyes. She reached for Michael's ticket with both hands, scanning it quickly. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please, go ahead. Michael nodded, not in triumph, but in quiet acknowledgement of the humanity that had just taken over the room. He stepped toward the jet bridge. And then something unexpected happened. Applause erupted, not polite, scattered clapping, but a wave of sound that filled the entire gate area. It wasn't for him. It wasn't even for the uniform. It was for the young man in the coffin below, who would never walk this bridge himself. As Michael disappeared down the narrow walkway, the Marine veteran raised his hand in a slow, deliberate salute. Others followed suit, not just veterans, but civilians, travelers, strangers united for a brief, powerful moment. The flight was quiet. Passengers who had been there at the gate spoke in hushed tones, as if they all carried the weight of what was waiting on the other end. Michael sat by the window, his cap resting in his lap, his hands folded loosely over it. Outside, clouds drifted by in soft, endless shapes, a sharp contrast to the steel resolve in his chest. When the wheels touched down in Iowa, a familiar ache rose in his throat. This was the final leg of the journey, a journey Daniel could no longer make for himself. The captain's voice came over the intercom, Ladies and gentlemen, before we disembark, we ask for your patience as we honor a fallen soldier being escorted home. Please remain seated. Michael stood as soon as the door opened. He stepped into the jet bridge, the smell of jet fuel and cool morning air mixing in his lungs. His boots hit the tarmac with a steady rhythm as he made his way toward the cargo bay. The ground crew stood silently in a loose semicircle, hats removed, heads bowed. Then the coffin appeared. The flag draped perfectly over the polished wood seemed to glow in the muted light. The red, white, and blue were as vibrant as they had been the day Daniel swore his oath. Michael's spine straightened, his right hand rising in a slow, deliberate salute. Above, through the tall glass windows of the terminal, passengers from the flight pressed their hands to the glass. Some had tears streaking down their cheeks. Others stood with their own hands over their hearts. The Marine veteran from the gate was among them, his arm raised in salute once more. Michael held his position until the honor guard lifted the coffin onto the waiting hearse. The sound of boots on pavement, the soft creak of the gurney, and the distant hum of the engines were the only noises that dared to break the moment's silence. Then, he turned, and there she was. Daniel's mother. She was small in stature, wrapped in a gray cardigan despite the summer air. Her eyes, red-rimmed, tired, met his. She took one step forward, then another, until they stood just a breath apart. "You brought my boy home," she said softly, her voice quivering but steady enough to be heard. Michael's throat tightened. "Ma'am. America brought him home. I was just his escort." Her hands, fragile but firm, closed around his. "You stayed with him. That means more than you'll ever know." For a moment, the world shrank to the two of them, standing beside the hero they both loved in different ways. As the hearse pulled away, Michael turned to walk back toward the terminal. He glanced once more at the passengers still gathered at the windows. He thought about the supervisor, the gate agent, the strangers who had spoken up. It struck him then, the rules that matter most aren't written in company manuals or printed on boarding passes. They're written in the quiet promises we keep to each other, in the moments when we choose humanity over convenience.